Chapter 1. The silent one. Laughter always came from behind. In hallways dimly lit and eternally echoing, Lena learned to flinch at the sound of sneakers against linoleum and whispered venom wrapped in giggles. She never turned around to face them, not because she didn't know what they were doing but because she knew too well. Their eyes were sharper than their words, and they used both like blades. She was the girl with the oversized glasses, the one whose hand-me-down uniforms hung awkwardly on her frame. Her voice rarely surfaced above a whisper, and when it did, it often trembled with a stutter she could not control. A deep birthmark covered half her left cheek, blooming like a bruise that never healed, and it was the first thing anyone ever saw, the only thing they remembered. At school, she sat alone. At home, she existed in silence. Her mother, a woman always too tired and too bitter for tenderness, never spoke Lena's name with warmth. Her father had long since disappeared, swallowed by another family he seemed to love more. And her siblings, if they remembered she lived in the same house, treated her as furniture, barely worth acknowledging. But Lena noticed everything. She noticed how her teacher's eyes darted past her when asking questions in class, how store clerks addressed the child behind her, never her, how her shadow always seemed to stretch longer than it should, as if the universe itself was trying to remind her she didn't belong in the light. Lena didn't cry, not because she wasn't sad, but because no one had ever taught her how to be comforted. So she did what all forgotten children do. She folded herself smaller, quieter, until her presence was little more than a sigh. Every afternoon, she retreated to the library, a place where no one looked twice at a girl who didn't speak. Books were her companions, their worlds kinder than the one she lived in. She read of queens with swords, of girls with dragons, of warriors who rose from the mud with vengeance in their blood. And somewhere deep inside her, something stirred, something that said, not yet, because Lena knew she would never be pretty enough for their pity, never bold enough to earn their awe. But she could be something else, something they wouldn't see coming. She just had to survive long enough to become it. And so, day by day, the silent one watched. She studied not just books, but people, patterns, power. She listened to their cruelty and learned their fears. She wrote in secret journals the things they never thought she noticed, their flaws, their lies, their weaknesses. She didn't know it yet, but the girl they all laughed at was preparing, not for revenge, for transformation. And in the quiet, something dangerous began to bloom. Chapter 2. The house that was never home. There is a kind of silence that does not soothe, but suffocates. Lena knew it well. It lived in the corners of her childhood home, thick as dust and just as unacknowledged. The house stood at the edge of a broken cul-de-sac, where the grass refused to grow and paint peeled like shedding skin. It was the kind of place that whispered of forgotten promises, a structure that had long ceased to be a home and instead became a container for people too tired to leave. Lena's room was a converted storage space, just wide enough for a cot and a shelf of old encyclopedias no one else wanted. The single window looked out onto a brick wall. She sometimes wondered what the sky looked like from somewhere else, from a place where windows didn't frame imprisonment. Her mother rarely entered unless to leave folded laundry or bang on the door to tell her dinner was cold. Conversation was a luxury they did not afford each other. Lena's siblings, twin boys 2 years older, treated her presence like an inconvenience, and her absence as a blessing. She existed between them like breath between sentences, necessary, but unnoticed. At night, Lena listened to the sounds of the television bleeding through thin walls, to laughter that never included her name. She created a world in her mind where she mattered. She named stars after herself and placed them in constellations that no one could erase. In her world, she rode dragons, wore armor, wielded her silence as a blade sharper than their cruelest words. On her 15th birthday, no one remembered. Not a single candle, not a glance. But Lena didn't cry. She had long since learned that tears were currency no one paid attention to. Instead, she wrote a single line in the middle of her journal. I will leave this place, and when I do, they'll remember me for every moment they did. In single quotes. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a promise. Chapter 3. The seed beneath the ashes. Before a wildfire, the forest sleeps, still, quiet, waiting. So did Lena. By 16. She had perfected invisibility. She spoke only when necessary, walked in shadows, never raised her hand in class. But behind that quiet demeanor was a girl collecting data. She observed every social game, every fake compliment, every betrayal. Not with bitterness yet, but with a mind like a ledger. Every humiliation was a number added to a balance sheet. Every cruel nickname, a note in the margin. Then came the spark. It happened on a Thursday, gray skies, soggy air, the kind of day where everything feels heavy. Lena was in the library when Mr. Green, the aging science teacher, asked her to deliver a packet to the principal's office. She didn't question him. She rarely questioned anyone. As she turned a corner, she heard her name, Lena? That girl's. Practically a ghost. Someone snorted. A girl's voice, sharp, familiar. Another laughed. No. She's like a shadow. She's always there, just sad and mute. Kind of creepy, right? And then the third voice, male, smug. She's not creepy. She's just nothing. Like, if you erased her, would anything change? Lena didn't freeze. She kept walking, her face expressionless. But something cracked. That night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her own reflection for a long time. The girl who stared back looked more like a memory than a person. Dull eyes, pale skin, that birthmark she had come to see not as a flaw, but a fate. She picked up a lipstick her mother had left behind, crimson red, nearly unused. And with deliberate precision, she wrote on the mirror, "You will not forget me." It wasn't vanity. It wasn't rage. It was prophecy. That night, Lena didn't read. She researched. About posture, tone, psychology. About self-made women. About the ones who rose from nothing, not by accident, but by design. The seed beneath. The ashes had begun to sprout. Chapter 4. The mask and the mirror. Some transformations happen overnight. Others simmer beneath the skin, slow and relentless, like tectonic plates shifting under centuries of pressure. Lena's came with neither bang nor blaze, but with the quiet unfolding of intention, each step so subtle, it almost went unnoticed. Like the slow unfurling of a chrysanthemum beneath moonlight. It began, fittingly, with a mask, not the kind worn at masquerades nor the metaphorical kind that people wear to blend into the world, but a literal mask, fashioned in secret, shaped from longing and defiance. She'd seen it in an old book about Venetian history, tucked between thick tomes on culture and war. The mask had belonged to a courtesan who hid her intellect behind allure, who conquered courts with words as much as beauty. Lena traced its outline until she memorized every curve, every flourish. She spent weeks creating her own version, cutting, painting, layering feathers and gold foil onto a canvas of papier-mâché. She did it not for beauty, but for control. Behind that mask, she wasn't Lena the ghost. She could be anyone, say anything. It gave her distance from her pain, and proximity to a version of herself she dared to imagine. The first time she wore it, alone in her locked room, she stood taller, not because she believed herself transformed, but because she could finally see who she might become. Her reflection wasn't merely an image anymore, it was a conversation, a negotiation between who she was and who she would dare to be. Then came the mirror. It was cracked, faded, perpetually fogged. Lena had hated it most of her life. It reflected only what others saw, a girl marked, broken, forgettable. But now, she looked into it with new eyes. She didn't see the stains on her skin. She saw symmetry in her cheekbones, depth in her gaze. Not beauty as the world defined it, but power, dormant and dangerous, waiting to be shaped, honed, wielded. She began to study more than books. She watched interviews with women who commanded rooms, learned the mechanics of charm, how to ask questions that made people talk, how to hold silence just long enough for others to lean in. She borrowed postures from dancers, poise from CEOs, cool detachment from fictional queens. Each day, after school, she would return home, shed her uniform, and rehearse. In front of the mirror, she practiced smiles that didn't reach her eyes, laughter that chimed like glass. Words weighted not with emotion, but strategy. She wasn't becoming someone new. She was becoming someone prepared. One afternoon, a neighbor's daughter, a girl 2 years younger who rarely spoke, knocked on her door. Her lip was split, her eyes rimmed in red. Lena invited her in. They sat in silence for a while before the girl whispered, "They call me a freak." Lena looked at her, saw the same quiet rage hiding in the child's shoulders, the same isolation. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel like a victim. She felt like a guide, a lighthouse in a storm she had long survived. She reached for her journal, tore out a page. On it she wrote, "You are not the names they give you. You are the name you build." The girl read it, clutched it to her chest like a holy text. That night, Lena added a new page to her journal. Phase 1, complete, the world still. Saw a quiet girl with a forgettable face, but beneath the mask and in front of the mirror, Lena saw something else entirely. An architect, and she was only just beginning to draw the blueprint of her empire. Chapter 5. The House of Hidden Fire. It began with a rumor, not the kind that spread like wildfire, chaotic and loud, but a slow burning ember, passed in whispers down the hallway, flickering quietly in the corners of conversations. Something was changing about Lena. She wasn't louder, she wasn't prettier, she was simply more poised, more precise, more unsettling to those who once mocked her without consequence. By the time spring arrived, the school had become a chessboard, and Lena silent, calculating. Lena was moving her pieces. Her first conquest wasn't a student, it was a teacher. Mr. Crowley taught European history and had a habit of dismissing questions he didn't deem relevant. For years, Lena had melted into her chair during his lessons unseen. But one day, as he droned on about monarchies and rebellions, she raised her hand and asked a question so sharply formed, so surgically placed, that it sliced through the room's boredom like a blade. What if the downfall of monarchs wasn't caused by revolutionaries but by the monarchs themselves, blind to their own rot? Mr. Crowley paused, flinched, then smiled, thin and brittle. He never underestimated her again. The second conquest was social. In a school governed by cliques, status was currency. Lena didn't buy into the economy. She rewrote the exchange rate. She began to frequent the library not as a place to hide, but as a fortress. She made it known that if you wanted help with your speech, your debate, your college application, you came to her. They did, one by one, the very girls who had rolled their eyes at her existence now sat across from her with trembling pens and eager smiles. Lena didn't smile back. She offered her insight with cool generosity. Her tone edged with something that made them nervous. She never asked for anything in return. Not yet. But debts were being written in invisible ink, and Lena knew how to read every word. Then came the party. Not just any party, but the end-of-term gala hosted by the school's richest student, Juliet Marlowe. An invite-only affair, where everyone wore secrets like perfume, and betrayal was served with champagne. Lena showed up in a black velvet dress that fit her like destiny. No mask this time, no trembling, just her, carved from every moment of humiliation, every bruise of silence, every ounce of rage transmuted into power. People turned to stare, some with curiosity, some with awe, some with the cold chill of recognition. She spoke little that night. She didn't need to. Her presence was a statement, and Juliet, perfect, untouchable Juliet, watched her like one might watch a spark land on silk. Dangerous. Later, in the restroom, Juliet approached her. "You're not like the girl I remember." Lena's lips curved. "No, I'm not." And in that moment, without fireworks or fury, Juliet knew what it was to be irrelevant. That night, Lena wrote again in her journal. Phase 2, in motion. The fire had been lit, and Lena was learning to dance in the flames. Chapter 6. The price of silence. By the time summer kissed the town with golden dust and languid afternoons, Lena had become more than a mystery. She was a storm system shifting silently above the school. No one knew when the thunder would fall, but they had learned at last to listen to the stillness. But power, Lena soon learned, comes with shadows. It began with a letter, slipped under her locker, cream-colored, handwritten. No name, just a single line. "We remember who you were." Her heart didn't race. It calcified, because she knew it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. At home, the house remained a crypt. Her mother, still cloaked in grief, rarely spoke. But now, there were pauses in her silences, moments where she looked at Lena as if about to ask who she'd become, and then thought better of it. Lena started locking her door. Not out of fear, but containment. Her plans were now too volatile to risk exposure. She began mapping connections. Teachers who were weak to flattery, students who thrived on validation, hall monitors who could be distracted with a smile. She sketched it all in her journal. Webs of power, tides of influence. But the letter haunted her, because the past, she knew, was not done with her yet. It came back not as a whisper, but a face. Elliot. He was the only one who had ever apologized. A boy with crooked teeth and kind eyes who had once thrown a rock at her shadow and cried about it later. Now, taller, sharper, but still with that same guilt hanging off him like old linen. I know what you're doing, he said to her one day as they crossed paths in the library. Lena didn't flinch. What's that? He hesitated. Becoming something else, someone else. She tilted her head, expression unreadable. Maybe I always was. You just never looked close enough. He watched her for a moment, then whispered, don't lose yourself in it, and walked away. Lena stood there, the pages of her book crinkling under clenched fingers. Not because of his words, but because, for a brief moment, she didn't know if she was angry at him or afraid he might be right. That night, she sat at her desk longer than usual. The mask hung on the wall. The mirror was dark. She opened her journal. A blank page stared back. She wrote, Phase 3, Dangerous Waters, and underneath it, to become the queen, you must survive the ghosts. Because the empire she was building was not just made of strategy and silence, it was forged from the ashes of the girl no one saw. But ashes could still burn, and some wounds, if left unattended, could become weapons. Chapter 7. When Queens bleed. The hallways echoed with silence now. Not the hush of fear, but the reverent pause people make when they feel something powerful walking by. Lena no longer needed to speak to be heard. Her silence had become a language, and they were all fluent in it. But silence could not shield her from betrayal. It began when her locker was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but something was added. A single photograph, one taken years ago, grainy and cruel. Her at 12, slouched, eyes down, a harsh word scrawled across her back in permanent marker. Freak, no signature. But the message was clear. She carried it home, studied it under the lamplight like a piece of forensic evidence. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from fury. Someone wanted her to remember, but they didn't know she never forgot. That week, 2 of her allies distanced themselves. Olivia, the cheer captain who had once latched onto Lena's quiet command, now avoided her gaze. Marcus, the boy who fed her gossip in exchange for secrets, suddenly went cold. The balance was shifting, and then came the assembly, a student slideshow meant to celebrate the year. Laughter, cheers, and then her photo, the same one from the locker, projected, large, lingering, a second too long, gasps, a few stifled laughs, teachers fumbling. Lena stood, not a word. She walked out while the room spun behind her, an entire auditorium unsure whether they'd just witnessed a mistake or a message. Outside, the sky had turned to bruised gold, clouds heavy with unshed rain. Lena walked straight to the old bleachers and sat there, letting the hush of wind speak for her. And then footsteps. Elliot, he didn't sit beside her, just stood, a few feet away. I tried to stop them, he said, quietly. She didn't look up. You knew? His voice cracked. I knew they were planning something. I didn't know it would be that. Silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Finally, Lena whispered, Do you believe I deserve this? No, he said instantly. And then, after a pause, But I think they're afraid you don't. A breeze passed, soft, then sharp. Lena turned to face him fully, for the first time in weeks. I'm not done, she said. He nodded. I know. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. I won't become the monster they want me to be, but I will become something they'll never forget. And with that, she walked away, toward the storm, toward the crown, because queens don't break. They rise. Chapter 8. The cost of Thorne's photo didn't fade from memory, it replicated. Passed from phone to phone, whispered through the corridors like a spell meant to summon her downfall. Some snickered behind their screens. Others watched her more carefully now, like one might watch a volcano with smoke curling from its peak. Lena didn't respond. Not publicly, but the silence she returned to the school with was different. Before, it had been armor. Now, it was a blade. She arrived every day with perfect poise, no tremble, no haste. Her clothes carried a sharp elegance, tailored lines and muted colors that made her seem untouchable. Her gaze, when it met theirs, did not accuse or defend. It judged. And behind that quiet power, a machine turned. She started collecting data, not gossip, truth. She followed the trail of the photo's origin, not through rumors but metadata. A watermark here, a file date there. Tech-savvy wasn't something she advertised, but it had always been one of her hidden realms of power. The source? Olivia, her former ally. The betrayal sliced deeper than expected. Olivia had been her mirror, once someone who traded attention for safety, who understood what it meant to shape perception like clay. And now, she'd thrown Lena to the wolves. That night, Lena stood in front of the mirror, her old self flickering in the back of her mind like a ghost. What did they want? To humiliate her? Break her? Erase the empire she'd built from the ashes of pain? She reached for the drawer where she kept the mask, the sleek one she'd designed herself, lacquered in obsidian and etched with feathers along the edges. Not to hide, but to remind, she had survived worse, and queens who rise from the gutter never forget the feel of dirt beneath their fingernails. The next day, she requested a private meeting with the school counselor, polite, calm, unbothered. But once the door closed, her voice dropped like stone into water, controlled, lethal. She didn't accuse. She reported everything. The leak of the photo, the digital trail, the metadata, the faces in the hallway who'd laughed first. She spoke with no tremor, no apology, as if reciting a eulogy for someone already buried. The counselor paled, promised investigation, promised discretion. Lena stood. I'm not asking for punishment, she said, voice smooth as silk pulled taut. I'm asking for precedent, and she left the room like a verdict delivered. By the end of the week, Olivia was suspended. The whispers shifted again. Now they weren't sure what Lena was capable of, but they were sure of one thing. She would not fall, and queens, they don't just survive, they remember, they rise, and when they bleed, they make it look like art. Chapter 9. The last curtain falls. Rain drizzled the morning of the tribunal, a soft, misting sort of rain that didn't soak through, but left everything feeling damp, uncertain. Lena arrived precisely at 8 a.m. dressed not in black nor crimson, but white. A crisp, unforgiving white pantsuit, with lapels that caught the light and shoes that clicked like punctuation marks on the marble floors of the administration wing. She wasn't summoned. She requested this meeting, and when the door opened, and the board members looked up, she didn't flinch beneath their eyes. She offered no greeting, no smile, only documents. A folder with timestamps, server logs, behavioral patterns. She laid them down like playing cards. You wanted evidence, she said. I brought receipts. The room was quiet, too quiet. She could feel the way they watched her, not like a student, not even like a threat, but like something else altogether. A reminder that the meat could grow fangs. That silence was sometimes strategy, and that elegance, when wielded right, could be sharper than a guillotine. She outlined patterns, digital behavior from Olivia's clique, coordinated harassment, even keyword trends from social media accounts they thought were anonymous. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Outside, the students waited. Whispers fluttered in the air like crows on a wire. No one knew what was happening behind those doors, but everyone felt it, the tremble in the atmosphere, the shift in the tide. An hour later, Lena stepped out. She said nothing, but the way she walked, the weight in her stride, it said everything. It was done. In the days that followed, Olivia transferred schools, her parents citing mental health recovery. Lena didn't comment. She didn't celebrate either. Queens don't dance on graves. They build gardens where empires once burned. The school restructured its bullying policy. Teachers whispered about student-led reform, but no one dared say Lena's name in vain again. She reclaimed her name, and more than that, she transcended it. On graduation day, she was the last to take the stage, not valedictorian, not prom queen, something rarer, the girl who'd rewritten her fate. As she accepted her diploma, she caught a glimpse in the mirrored panel beside the podium. Her reflection, older, straighter shoulders, steadier eyes. Behind her, for just a flicker of a second, she imagined her younger self, shy, bruised, in oversized sweaters, watching from the shadows, and smiling. She didn't need revenge. She'd built something better, a name not feared but revered, a legacy born not of cruelty but of choosing to rise. And sometimes, the loudest triumph is walking away untouched, while the world finally hushes to listen. She was the girl everyone mocked, oversized glasses, a birthmark she couldn't hide, and a silence they mistook for weakness. Years of humiliation buried her, but they didn't break her. They transformed her.